Signal South. Hey!
This is Signal South. I'm Lisa Calhoun, and my guest today, David Cummings, is arguably the most consequential serial investor and entrepreneur in the South. He bootstrapped Hannon Hill out of a Duke dorm room, built Pardot into the largest multiple SaaS exit of its year with zero outside capital, turned his own proceeds into the Atlanta Tech Village, the fourth largest startup hub in the country and the birthplace of pace setters like Calendly and SalesLoft. And in December 2023, he bought 56 historic buildings in South Downtown Atlanta, 10 contiguous blocks. That is the neighborhood where Atlanta was founded. 30 months later, the FIFA World Cup put 500,000 fans through this district's front door. And now we get to hear some of the reality of David Cummings just post FIFA. David, welcome to Signal South. I'm so glad you're here.
Lisa, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited and honored to be here.
So let's just dig right in. I mean, FIFA World Cup basically just pulled up and out. And the two finalists, Argentina and Spain, both ran through Atlanta. How did that feel, buying South Downtown and revitalizing it for 30 months, and then the world is on your doorstep?
You know, from a timeline point of view and from a grand opening party perspective, really couldn't have scripted it even better. You know, I was told that historic buildings take longer to fix up than you think, and it's more expensive, and all those things are true. But by having the World Cup as a hard and fast deadline, immovable deadline, just like, you know, when I coach entrepreneurs, I always tell them, you know, look for some big event annually. For us in the Pardot days, it was the Salesforce.com Dreamforce event.
Yeah.
And so in September every year, it was an immovable event. And it was an amazing forcing function to work backwards from the product side, from the partnerships, from the sales, from everything. And so no different than building a bunch of functionality to get ready for a massive annual trade show. Here with the World Cup, we had the world's stage from a soccer football perspective right in the neighborhood. And so it helped us with permitting, it helped us with building momentum, it helped us with signing up restaurateurs and creating that sense of urgency to open up in time for the World Cup. And it mattered. One of the things that I missed in a good way is I was really focused on the 8 matches that Atlanta hosted as the big days. And I missed that every time the US played, even on days that Atlanta wasn't hosting a match, it was a big deal and we were having a block party. And then every time that there was some other big team like a Spain or Argentina or England or any of those playing, we would also have a bunch of people that would come to the neighborhood to watch on the big outdoor TV, to hang out, to watch in the sports bar. So in my mind, the World Cup was 8 days in Atlanta, and it turned into, call it, 20 days of energy over the course of 6 weeks in South Downtown. And so for having 100,000 people come through the neighborhood in a 6-week period, there was no other possible way to have a better grand opening party for South Downtown. Now, the key thing was it was a grand opening party. It wasn't the be all end all. And so that was an important message as well. People were like, oh, you're going to do all this stuff for the World Cup and the World Cup's going to come and go. And then you're still going to be here. And so we had to reiterate that message that the World Cup is just the grand opening party. We're here forever.
On that note, the Atlanta Convention and Visitors Bureau said that because of the World Cup, they are projecting 2 billion more in visitors coming through downtown Atlanta just because of the absolutely positive experience that people had. I feel like it was a grand opening, but now we actually have the full menu of events. I think it's really important when founders like yourself, but people in general, celebrate the wins. You brought South Downtown with the team, with the president and CEO, John Birdsong, and the entire team to a momentous moment in absolute glory. I mean, it was fabulous. Anyone who's walked through South Downtown was in shock and awe, including so many of the international visitors that we had that were posting all over socials that Atlanta was amazing. America was great. You know, why didn't they come here more often? So what I'm curious about, if we could look pre-FIFA just for a minute, how did it feel in that buildup? What was the energy like? What were you most concerned about? What were you most excited by?
Well, in the prior 2.5 years, I've had the opportunity to tour the neighborhood with people like yourself and plenty of other fellow Atlantans. And for the majority of that time, you could see old buildings, but it was hard to see the potential for a thriving community, right? The buildings were just so run down. There was so much barbed wire. There was so much graffiti. There were so many places where you knew the building was supposed to have windows and it just had plywood. There were multiple buildings that had no doors. They were just totally plywooded over where the door would go. The sidewalks were all crumbling, so for a long time, it was very much the entrepreneur selling the dream. And, with real estate, it's a little different than software. The lead times are longer. If you go a direction that's not right, it can be more expensive to pivot. And so it very much was selling a field of dreams. You build it and they will come. And boy, I just hoped uh, that it would all come together and that people would enjoy it and they would show up for it and whatnot. And so it was a big leap of faith, but thankfully it all came together. The day before the first game was held in Atlanta, we were still swinging some hammers and polishing some floors and trying to get some signs up. And even after we'd had a few matches in Atlanta, we were still fixing things up. But the overall canvas was done. The walkability, the new sidewalks, the new facades.
Some people have told me, David Cummings, he's such a visionary, which you are. He knew this would all work out perfectly. He had it calculated. He wasn't concerned. He didn't need hope. He had a plan. He was completely calm because this man knows that it was going to be absolutely fantastic from the moment, which I guess, you perhaps projected that from time to time. But is that true or is that untrue?
Well, I had spent enough time in places like um, European city centers, yourself included, have spent quite a bit of time in European city centers. And I knew that the bones were there,
Yeah.
right? The sidewalks on Broad Street are 20 feet wide on both sides.
Yeah.
I knew that from a building, from the bones of the buildings, the best neighborhoods have gentle density, human scale architecture. A
Yeah.
simple way to think about it is find the tallest tree in the neighborhood. And if all the buildings or most of the buildings are the height of the tree or less, it's going to feel really nice to walk around. And
What
that's typically 2 to 5 stories tall. So I knew that from a bones point of view and architecture and history, it was going to be a home run. But to your point, does it take 12 months to bring a dilapidated building back to life that's been condemned? A lot of people don't realize that, we bought the buildings, 50 plus buildings. Even after buying them, we still didn't go inside of them. So imagine you buy some buildings and you haven't even been inside of them. And they're like, well, why don't you just go in the door? Well, there is no door. Well, why don't you just take the plywood off? Well, plywood's on so strong on the first floor that the only way to enter the building is to put a ladder up and go in through the second floor plywood window. So this
Wow.
idea that like you have all these buildings and they're there, like, you can touch them and feel them, but you can't even go inside of them after you've bought them without tremendous amounts of effort.
So
So,
the oldest building, and doing the research for this, these are the bones of old Atlanta, 1869. Is that true? Is that the general oldest layer that you purchased there?
short answer. The long answer is if you go to the Fulton County records, most of our buildings will have a date of 1900. And
Okay.
the reason they have a date of 1900 is because that's when the county started keeping the records.
Got it.
They didn't
Yeah.
have records before 1900. Now, if you go back in time, there are older pictures, and there's a thing called the Sanborn Fire Map. So Sanborn was like a fire insurance company that would make detailed maps to sell their insurance. And so between pictures that we have with dates on the pictures, like in the AJC and on postcards, plus the Sanborn Fire Maps, yes, 1869, around that period, we have several buildings. Another thing that I learned along with those two examples is that most of the buildings are sitting on the foundation of the previous building. And so
Hmm.
it's like the building was there and maybe it burned down, maybe it was torn down and the rubble was left there. Maybe the first
Wow.
floor was left there and they put a floor on top of it. One of our buildings, you go by it right now, it looks like a really, really charming 2-story building. It has a sports bar in it. It's got a startup office on the second floor. But then you look at old pictures, it used to be a 5-story building. And then the upper floors had a fire. Instead of rebuilding the upper floors, they took the floors down and just rebuilt the first and second floor. But it's all the same facade, and you can see the fire marks on the inside of the building. So this idea
Wow.
that buildings have their own lives where they grow and expand or they shrink and is very much a part of the history as well. But showing the pictures of 100 to 150 years ago and then going through the county records and even the Sanborn fire maps and seeing like, oh, this was a grocery store in the 1870s, or this was a haberdashery, or this was a meat market. It's so much fun uncovering the history.
Let me get your reaction to something that comes from the National Trust. One study done by the National Trust found that 36% more jobs per square foot than districts of big new buildings, the classic high rise model like you see in other spaces. So, knowledge spillover research says the network value of proximity dies within about 500 meters, a few walkable blocks. Did
Mhm.
you know that? Did you feel that? What was in your mind when you purchased these dilapidated, mixed use, boarded up, um, you know, uh, buildings that nobody in 70 to 100 years had even been inside or thought about?
Few different ideas came to mind. The prominent one was really the college campus experience, right? So if you think about the college campus, you have the dorms, the living spaces, you think about the academic buildings as like the offices and the libraries, and then you think about the play side of it, the fields or the athletics or the gym. And so this live, work, play concept is something that I'd always loved from my college experience. And then if you think about some larger companies like a Google, they will have a Google campus, the Googleplex. And the
Right, right.
Googleplex has the restaurants and it has the office space and it has the volleyball courts and it has the barber shop.
And you
And
can
so
bike or transit into it. Transit or walkability, not having to get in a car, not having to get in traffic. Such a big part of some of those campus environments, whether they're corporate or college.
yes, exactly. And so, from a neighborhood point of view, South Downtown is the most transit oriented development in all of Metro Atlanta by far. Nothing even
Yeah.
holds a candle to it. It has two MARTA stations that are less than a half mile apart on our main thoroughfare. It has two major arteries that have dedicated protected bike lanes. And then within a half mile, you have I-20, I-75, and I-85. And then from the MARTA station's point of view, you have Five Point Station, which is the busiest station in the system, and it connects the east-west lines and the north-south lines. So the best train access, the best bike access, and the best car access in all of Metro Atlanta. Just on the Grady curve, which again is less than a half mile from South Downtown, you have 400,000 cars a day.
Yeah, I know. I take that
Oh,
exit.
yeah.
It's unbelievable. Interesting research I found from the National Association of Realtors is that 53% of Americans who are Gen Z or millennial would trade a big detached house for a walkable neighborhood. And 30% said they'd be happy to pay more for it than for the large detached suburban McMansion. Do you feel that that sort of walkability is now a superpower for neighborhoods, driving revitalization?
Absolutely. You look at the two most expensive places to live in the United States, it's New York City and San Francisco, and
Yeah,
they're the most walkable, they're the most dense, they're the most livable without a car. I
I live in New York. I walk to my office in Studio Flex. I love the Beltline. I would say walkability has been transformational for my life, and I wonder how
yes,
many of
but
our
you still
listeners
get in the car to
disagree.
go ride the horse.
I do get in the car to ride the horse. Getting back to South Downtown specifically, though, one of the more beautiful ceremonies in the lead up to the grand opening World Cup ceremonies was your opening of Founders Green on May 20th. That half acre of beautifully landscaped grass now, it had been a parking lot for
At least
70
since
ish years.
1956, as far as we could
Yeah,
tell, yeah, 70 years.
such a huge change. And looking at the beautiful trees, the beautiful green, the environment, it's like nothing Atlanta has ever seen. So I wonder who you're seeing is most attracted now to some of these founder suites that are now back in the center of Atlanta where Atlanta was founded, and it's been 100 years since something like that was even
Yes.
possible.
So one of the things that really gets me excited is that downtowns were the original social network. To your point earlier about the 500 meters, right? That's why downtowns per square acre were by far the most prosperous, by far the highest property taxes, by far the highest density of people. And so, in the age of technology, obviously social media and everything else, there's a bit more distance on average. But as we know, people want to be around other people. People want to
Yeah.
go sit in Founders Green and watch the soccer game together. They want to go to El Tesoro and sit on the patio and have a drink together. They want to go get on their bikes and ride down MLK to the Beltline together. And so people are inherently social. And so by having a neighborhood that is so walkable. Again, the big sidewalks, again, all the bike paths, again, all the train stations, and then having a common theme. And so I think this idea of a common theme is really important. Obviously, our theme is founders and startups and technology. You know, some people talk about these kinds of areas as an urban work campus. And so an urban work campus would be like Avalon in Alpharetta. It'd be like Colony Square in Midtown, where you have a bunch of restaurants, you have a bunch of office space, maybe you have a hotel, maybe you always have a green for doing
The thing is,
concerts and
though, they're
yoga
always the
and
same offices, the same restaurants, and the same stores. What I really find so interestingly different about South Downtown and some of the other smaller urban in-town communities like in Inman Park or something in Grant Park is that people are still able to live and work, but create their own unique, individual, bespoke lifestyle and community. And that it's like a nirvana, I think, for so much of the population. I mean, what are some of the favorite businesses that have moved in over the last year in South?
several years ago, I was reading just as much as I could about different downtowns across the US. And of course, using ChatGPT and Claude, I could go process the 100-page annual reports for the last 10 years for the top 20 metros and look for patterns. And I was reading through one a couple years ago, and it said that in their downtown, they are focused on unique boutique and local operators for their
Mm.
stores, for their restaurants, for their coffee shops. And so when I saw that term, unique, boutique, and local, I was like, ding, ding, ding. That's exactly what we need to do for South Downtown. So no chain stores, no chain restaurants, find the best local operators in Metro Atlanta and then help make them be as successful as possible. So unique, boutique, and local is something that we've been saying for a while now on our team, and we did it came by way of a little R&D of another downtown, and in this case R&D stands for rip off and duplicate.
Excellent. It's much less expensive.
Much less expensive, and somebody else has figured it out, so let's take their lead and see if it works for us. So to your question of what types of startups and tech companies and creative companies have moved in, and it has been awesome. We've had a number of different local companies. One is called Doctor Knows Best. And so an Emory doctor created a device that helps babies and little kids suck the snot out of their nose electronically for
Christy Brown
parents.
has done amazing work with that. Yeah.
And so Christy relocated her, very successful, many millions of dollars revenue business to South Downtown. We have another one that relocated to South Downtown that's called AdPipe, and they work with large brands on their video management. So think of software that uses a combination of corporate produced video and AI tools to get a lot more value out of
Mhm.
your video. We have another one that's called Undaunted that has built a series of robots that help with areas like downtowns that have lots of people and lots of things going on. And so it can help answer questions for tourists coming through. It can help with people that might, be hanging out in the wrong spot at the wrong time of day to move them along to to a more appropriate spot. And so just those three companies alone have raised over $20 million of venture capital. And so this idea from a downtown Atlanta point of view, there's been a lot of baggage in downtown Atlanta for as long as I've lived here, which is 24 years.
You said on the record, our biggest challenge in 24 months, this is before the World Cup, is going to be convincing Atlantans to give South Downtown another shot.
And that
Um,
is still true today. That is
yeah.
100% still true. Not so much that they don't want to give it a shot, more so that it's just not even on their radar, right? So, as you know,
Oh,
it takes a while for word of mouth. Downtown does have a lot of baggage with it. We did get a lot of goodwill from the World Cup and tens of thousands of people coming through our section of the neighborhood across, 1 million people came through downtown for the World Cup. And so it's starting to happen. People are starting to tell their friends about it or say, "Hey, I want to show you this historic district that you probably haven't seen before. Let's go to Glide Pizza for dinner. Let's go to Broad Street Barbecue. Let's go to El Tesoro." And so it is happening, but as you know, things take time.
absolutely. Well, and it hasn't been overnight. It's been 2+ years, and the transformation is really incredible. One of the things that surprised me, it's that downtown has an incredible job density already. And with
Mhm.
so many new businesses moving in now because of the revitalization and redevelopment, there's a greater job density coming. Could you give me the update on that?
From the 1830s when Atlanta was laid out until 1960s, downtown Atlanta was the central business district. Everything across the metro region fed into downtown. It was designed to be mostly a suburban downtown where you drive your car in, you drive it out. MARTA was built in the late 70s, finished in the early 80s. And Atlanta, from a real estate boom point of view, really doesn't have any geographic boundaries. There's no big body of water to slow down the expansion. And so it expanded in all directions, but primarily north of I 20. So for the last 50 years, over 80% of all development, all buildings, all houses, all everything occurred north of I 20. And so as part of that, what happened is you had a bunch of downtowns built. And so Midtown
Yeah.
Atlanta became its own downtown. Buckhead has a downtown portion. The perimeter has a downtown portion. The Cobb Galleria area has a downtown portion. Area around the new Braves ballpark is starting to feel more like a downtown area. And even if you go further north to like Avalon, it's got a downtown feel as well. And so what happened is instead of being one super downtown like Boston has, so Boston has the most incredible downtown, but it's really the only downtown in a very large metro. Atlanta being so spread out and not having a body of water, Atlanta really has a bunch of downtowns. And
Hmm.
so, for a lot of different reasons, and it basically created a lot of different places for people and companies to move, such that downtown Atlanta became primarily Georgia State University, which is the largest university in the whole state in terms of student body population. Downtown Atlanta has always had quite a few government agencies, local, state, federal. Downtown Atlanta has the tourist area, which it's most well known for now, the aquarium being the anchor. But then you also have the Georgia World Congress Center, which is the fourth largest convention center in the United States, over 4 million square feet of convention space. So outside of the World Cup, downtown Atlanta gets roughly 50 million visitors a year between
Wow.
the arenas and the stadiums and the concert venues and the convention centers and the Olympic Park and all of the different tourist activities and museums. So 50 million people, downtown Atlanta is the front porch to the region. Now it is no longer the downtown for the region because now it's decentralized and we have lots of downtowns across metro Atlanta. But even with all the different downtowns across the region, 50 million people go to downtown Atlanta proper.
Right. Right.
So there
What do
is
you
plenty of foot traffic, but it's a bit episodic.
Well, it's such an iconic view on Broad Street in South Downtown looking toward the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which sort of
Mhm.
fills the view at the end of the street. And then you have these 100+ year old buildings and then this dynamic, very modern stadium. And there's
I
nothing
love
quite
that
like it.
contrast. Yeah.
I don't know of any other city quite like that.
When you're standing on Broad Street at Mitchell Street, you look east and you can see the gold dome of the Georgia State Capitol. You can see the beautiful 1930s Art Deco skyscraper, which is City Hall. And then you look north and you look right into Five Point Station, the busiest train station in Atlanta. And then you look east on the same axis as the state capitol, and it's Mercedes-Benz Stadium in all of its ultra modern glory. And then you look south on Broad Street, and it runs right into Garnett Station. So from one intersection, Broad and Mitchell, the state capitol, City Hall, the busiest train station, the most iconic stadium, one of the most iconic stadiums in the whole world, and then another train station. So the sight lines are just spectacular.
So the trends are people, especially in the age of AI, feeling a lack of community, a lack of connection with with their own humanity. They're looking for community. They're looking for more walking, less cars. People are looking for something very real. What do you expect? What do you believe will be true of the population in South Downtown in 10 years?
So, to be clear, most of the South Downtown greater neighborhood is government building. And so it's unusual. There's a million square foot federal courthouse next to one of our buildings. There's a 1.6 million square foot federal office building next to a different one of our buildings. There's a bunch of general government offices around, like the Fulton County headquarters. And like I mentioned, you go a few blocks away and you've got the state government headquarters across a bunch of buildings. And then across the street from them, you have the City of Atlanta government buildings, and Atlanta Public Schools building is on the next block down. So most of the neighborhood is government buildings. Now, thankfully, the heart of the neighborhood, the geographic center of the neighborhood, is our buildings. And so our buildings have the restaurants and the bars and the creative office space and amazing boutique apartments from department stores from the 1800s. And so the center of the neighborhood is the live, work, play. And then the periphery, but most of the neighborhood is government buildings. And so government buildings are, they bring good and bad. The good side is that there's a lot of people that have very stable jobs, thousands in the neighborhood, thousands and thousands of them. The downside is that most of the government buildings, almost all of them in the neighborhood, are isolated from the neighborhood. It's a strange
Well,
thing.
huge. They're absolutely huge, and I guess they're parking underneath or something.
Exactly. Big skyscrapers. They have no dialogue with the street. There's no retail at the base of the building. A lot of them are like fortresses. So you look around and you're like, there's 10,000 quality jobs within a 5-minute walk of all of our buildings. But then all these buildings that these people are in, no interaction with the street at all. To your point, big parking
Well,
decks
and
underneath.
world-class education too, Georgia State, which is such a unique place, I think, to live in South Downtown. There's the dynamism of the student population at Georgia State, and it's an interesting juxtaposition. I mean, that is state jobs, and yet Georgia State is very much a world-renowned university.
Yes. And so, another element of downtown that makes it unusual, downtown Atlanta, is that it's a lot bigger than a typical downtown from a
Hmm.
geographic point of view. So the official part of downtown is 1.2 square miles. That's the downtown improvement district. But if you take basically everything that's bordered by the trains on the west side and then the interstates with the Grady curve plus a little buffer on it, it gets to 2 to 3 square miles depending on what you count in, which is quite large from an area point of view. And so because of that, you could be in downtown Atlanta on the northern tip, like in the top of Peachtree Center, and you could be a full mile away from where our buildings are in the heart of South Downtown. And so it just creates really sub neighborhoods. And so there's names for the sub neighborhoods already, like Fairleigh Poplar and South Downtown, and Castleberry Hill is included in some of the downtown maps, and it's a really cool historic, think of it as old train warehouses that have been turned into really neat art galleries and loft apartments, but it has a very industrial feel. So it's a long way of saying it's not one downtown Atlanta neighborhood. It's lots and lots of sub neighborhoods within the 2 to 3 square miles.
So for someone listening to this, who should run, not walk to South Downtown? Is it the person that sees a government job in their future and wants a walkable life? Or is it the founder who is bootstrapping and needs an inexpensive but real startup community to be a part of? I mean, for myself, I started the business that really launched me right to market in Little 5 Points across the street from the Vortex
Mm-hmm.
because it was affordable and it was walkable. So those things really matter when you're starting a business. Or is it another type of person? Who is the number one most likely candidate to love this experience that is so new on the Atlanta scene?
So the three main archetypes, the three audiences that we serve today, and I think indefinitely. One is the professional that lives in one of Atlanta's original streetcar neighborhoods. And so the original streetcar neighborhoods are places like Grant Park and Inman Park and West End and Castleberry Hill.
The old trolley neighborhoods know who they are because there's a really unique,
And they all have great sidewalks. They all have great
yeah.
walkability. They all have a little commercial district themselves. They all have typically very small lot lines, so lots of craftsman houses. And so they, another way to say it is they live within a 15-minute drive of South Downtown. A lot of people don't realize, one of the most visited spots in all of Georgia is Ponce City Market, right on the
Mm,
Beltline. Tons of great offices, tons of great apartments, tons of great restaurants. Ponce City Market is a 10, 11-minute drive from South Downtown. It's
yeah.
super close. And so the first archetype is the streetcar suburbs. The second archetype or audience for South Downtown is the urbanists, people who love urban environments. They love the walkability. They might live in Sandy Springs, but they love taking MARTA as part of their daily commute. And so the urbanists that love the walkability or they love riding their bike, they might even ride their bike. They might even come in from, 30 minutes away on the bike, but they ride the bike year round. One
Yeah.
entrepreneur in South Downtown, lives over near the Beltline and walks I think he said it's 32 minutes each way. And so he every day of the year, or, every day he comes into the office, it's a full half an hour walk each way. But he loves it, and he lives on the Beltline, and he walks a few miles into South Downtown.
That's a great lifestyle.
And then the third audience, so the first one, of course, is the streetcar suburbs, and call it like a 15-minute drive. And the second audience is the urbanists. They want to ride MARTA, they want to take their bike in, they love just the traditional street grid and the traditional buildings. And then the third audience is entrepreneurs who live south of I-20. And so they live, in Peachtree City, or they live in Fayetteville, or they live in Noonan, and they're building their startup and they are committed to making it successful. But their friends, their family, their parents, whatever the case might be, maybe their spouse and his or her job is south of I-20. And so they want to be in that startup community. Maybe they live in Peachtree City and they drive 30 minutes, but it's a whole lot better to drive 30 minutes into South Downtown and be part of the tech startup
Yeah.
community than it is to drive another 30 minutes north or 25 minutes north into Midtown or Buckhead and fight the Grady Curve or fight Georgia 400 going that way. So those are the three audiences: the streetcar suburbs, the urbanists that just love that urban environment, and then entrepreneurs that live south of I-20. And really, it's been great.
It sounds amazing. As a recovering software serial entrepreneur, what is different about building in the real world? What have you learned that you couldn't have learned building, being co-founder at SalesLoft or building part?
So the real world elicits so much more emotion, so much more of a visible response. And so what
Mm,
I mean by that is, in SalesLoft, we could go build a feature and say, look, we have the coolest module ever for making more phone calls for your sales rep. And the world loved it and the world needed it. People didn't fall out of their seats saying, this is amazing. A
yeah.
small number of sales leaders did, but versus in South Downtown, you go give a group a tour or a friend a tour, and you walk down Mitchell Street and then you walk up Broad Street and you just see it in their eyes. And then you go inside of, Mason's Furniture from 100 years ago, which is now Terminus Hub. And then you go inside of ATV Sylvan, which used to be the Sylvan Hotel 100 years ago, and it has completely different architecture. And then you go inside of El Tesoro and you're like, this was a jewelry store 100 years ago. And then you go inside of the Rose and it used to be a liquor store, but an upscale one 100 years ago. And it just looks totally different. Then you go into the Cotton Gym building, and it was for 75 years, it was the place to buy seeds in Atlanta. And you can see evidence of it in the facade, and you can see things when you go in the lobby. And so just the emotional reaction is amazing in the physical world, especially in the real estate. Just the built environment is something different.
Atlanta is an iconic downtown. I mean, it needed revitalization and it had become a disaster. But now it has that potential and all of those dreams for all of those generations. There are pieces of them still there.
For over 100 years, the most iconic Atlanta company for locals was Rich's Department Store. And
Mm,
so Rich's Department Store started in South Downtown in one of our buildings, 82 Peachtree Street. Started in the 1860s, and it was the Harrods of Atlanta for over a
wow.
100 years. But of course, things don't stay the same. And eventually it was bought by Macy's. And so now when you go to the Macy's at Lenox Mall, that used to be the Rich's Department Store. And prior to that, it used to be downtown in several different locations. The reason I bring it up is that Atlanta, as a city and as a region, was founded on commerce. It wasn't founded to be a port city. It wasn't founded as some outlaws were staking claim in a certain area. Atlanta was created for commerce. It was a way to move goods from the East Coast to the Mississippi River. That's why Atlanta existed. So you had to go down the Appalachians and you had to get to, a plateau of sorts. It's still very hilly in Atlanta, but it's not mountainous. And so you had to move goods from the Northeast to the Mississippi River. And back in the 1840s, you couldn't go through the Appalachians and you couldn't go over them. So you went down and around them. And that's why Atlanta exists. The reason I say all this is that Atlanta was built for commerce. It was built by entrepreneurs that were trying to better themselves, better their family, provide a better life for them. And here we are, and we're,
And
we're still doing the same thing.
why does this matter to you? Walking around the streets of South Downtown with you and other entrepreneurs that you're touring, I often see the shining eyes of people who come up to you, want to shake your hand and say thank you for revitalizing this our cultural heritage here in Atlanta in the South. Why does it continue to inspire you? What does this mean to you?
So, two aspects of it. One, this idea of every world-class city has a great downtown. And I always felt like our downtown wasn't living up to the opportunity that the rest of Atlanta shows. And so this was a way to jumpstart that process. And then second, I think that bringing people together, building community, whether it's community around tech entrepreneurs or it's community around people who love a certain sport or it's community around people who love food and beverage. This idea of bringing people together around like-minded things has always been a joy of mine. And so Tech Village in Buckhead has been more successful than I could ever have imagined. And it is bringing entrepreneurs together. South Downtown gets to bring entrepreneurs together with the urbanists, with the historic preservation, with the walkability, with the unique boutique and local. And so it's bringing people together that have like-minded interests. And in this case, it happens to be the neighborhood where the three train lines came together to form Atlanta. And so the founding neighborhood of Atlanta, literally where it started, reinvented for today's founders. I had put it out to the universe that I wanted to do a big civic project for Atlanta. And so I had socialized it with a handful of people, not a ton, but a handful of people that I was looking for some social impact project for Atlanta. And so I put it out into the universe. And I would say within 2 years of putting it out there, it just fell in my lap one day.
Wow. How long did it take for you to react to this opportunity?
Within a month, we were under contract in a way that there was no going back. Hard money. There were a
So
lot of
what's your
sleepless nights, don't get me wrong, from a challenge and an opportunity and, outside of, my comfort zone. And, there's a lot of those. It's just, you don't know about the buildings. You don't know about, the social challenges in the neighborhood. You don't know about the amount of baggage that local Atlantans have built up around downtown. You don't know if the city and the county are going to want to play ball. And so all those things were unknowns, and all the properties were already in foreclosure. And so because they were already in foreclosure, the way the foreclosure process works in Georgia is the first Tuesday of every month on the county courthouse, whatever property's in foreclosure gets sold at auction. And so when I found out about it, there was only a few weeks until the foreclosure auction was going to happen at the beginning of November. So I found out about it in October. And so within a couple of weeks, it was like, this is going to be on the courthouse steps, whether we're going to bid on it or not. So it
so
happened really fast. But, the unsung hero of the story, and they, lost all their money and got wiped out, all the equity was, the previous entrepreneur who saw the opportunity for the neighborhood and, spent 7+ years and a fortune assembling the properties and helping develop the neighborhood as a certified historic district for historic tax credits and enrolling the neighborhood in the brownfield tax credit program because of all the environmental contamination and, all of the social challenges of trying to, take buildings that were occupied by urban campers and move the urban campers out.
mm,
So the previous entrepreneur that had the vision that took the big leap of faith and got wiped out, boy, in 7+ years, they did a tremendous amount of work. And so sometimes as an entrepreneur, it's good to be the second one that comes in and says, okay, the vision was right, but maybe the timing was a little off and let's give it another run at it. So there's a lot of luck in these things.
rentable. And when I look at the photos of the renovations that your on team architects have created. It is a project unlike any other. What's happening in South Downtown is so local and yet so historic and important that because it's under the umbrella of David and Atlanta Ventures, not enough of our neighbors know about what's now possible. David, you've been generous with your time, and this story is amazing, and its chapters are being written every month or two. Is there anything we should have on our radar as we go into the fall and the holiday season?
I appreciate your time and I appreciate your enthusiasm and support of bringing Atlanta's founding neighborhood back to life. And to your point, to anybody who's listening, anybody who lives in Atlanta or travels through Atlanta, our ask of you is to come support the unique boutique and local entrepreneurs in South Downtown. Come visit the tech entrepreneurs at the Tech Village. Come have a burrito. Come have a slice of pizza, some barbecue. It really is an amazing experience. Come to Broad Street and Mitchell Street, and you will enjoy your downtown.
Thank you for your time again, David. It's been an amazing conversation.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.